Night had fallen over New Orleans, the sky a deep canvas of black pierced only by the faint cold glow of the moon. The air was thick with the scent of burning sugarcane from distant plantations, mingling with the damp, heavy aroma of the Mississippi River. Somewhere in the shadows, chains clinked softly, metal scraping against metal, a sound that spoke of confinement of bodies tethered and lives restrained. 4 African-American soldiers stood silently, their wrists bound in heavy iron shackles. Their faces bore the weight of exhaustion, but their eyes shimmered with an unspoken courage. Stories of valor, of sacrifice, of loyalty erased by history were etched in the lines of their worn features. Behind them, the wooden cabin sagged under the weight of decades. Its timbers cracked, its roof caved in places, yet it remained a silent witness to untold truths. The ground beneath was dirt trampled and scarred, a reminder of the toil and suffering endured. And beyond the cabin, across the horizon, strange flames flickered intermittently, dancing, as though in response to some unseen rhythm. Locals whispered that these were not ordinary fires. They were the restless echoes of souls who had passed too soon. Shadows moved with the flames. Footsteps seemed to echo from nowhere, a phantom army of the lost forever marching. The wind carried whispers, faint voices that spoke of vanished men, of families torn apart, of towns abandoned after nights set ablaze by mysterious lights, fact and legend intertwined. The official records might note the existence of these soldiers, or a missing regiment, or the events of a night gone undocumented. Yet folklore breathed life into those dry words, turning each note into a story of haunting persistence. Tales passed from one generation to another, ghosts of plantations, phantom drums in the distance, warnings in dreams and songs carried through the night by voices no longer of this world. New Orleans, 1815, a city of contrasts, of vibrancy and shadow, where chains held not just bodies but histories, and the night sky bore witness to courage that the written record would never fully remember. The 4 soldiers stood still, yet somehow in that stillness, their spirits seemed to ripple outward, touching the air, the trees, the distant water, reminding anyone who watched that bravery often goes unseen. And in that silence, one could almost hear the march of those who came before, the ghostly cadence of men, whose fates were unknown, whose stories were swallowed by time. Before we begin, leave a comment where you are listening from, the exact time you started. Share this moment, become a part of the space where history and legend collide. A story waits to unfold, and its echoes will follow you long after the night has passed. The year was 1815. New Orleans still smelled of wet earth and burning cane. The city had survived wars, floods, and epidemics. Streets twisted with mud and cobblestones, lamps flickering against the humid air. Shadows stretched long from the dimly lit cabins that lined the outskirts. Here, survival was as much about cunning as it was about strength. Beyond the bustling port and the merchant quarters, plantations sprawled like quiet ghosts. Sugarcane fields stretched endlessly, rustling in the warm night wind. Somewhere in the distance, a faint drumbeat echoed, not from human hands but from memories, a rhythm older than the city itself. The soldiers stood near the cabin, the walls scarred with decades of weather and labor. Each plank told a story of hands that built and hands that were beaten, of voices that sang softly to ease pain. And now in this moment, the air seemed to hold its breath. The ground beneath was soft, churned by years of footsteps. Hoof prints mingled with human ones, signs of life and toil, and signs of absence. Footprints that led nowhere, disappearing like the stories of those who had vanished in the night. Lanterns swayed in the distance, casting long, trembling shadows. Their light caught glimpses of the soldiers' faces, furrowed brows, clenched jaws. Silent prayers whispered under breath. The night was alive yet still, as if it waited. The wind carried scents of smoke, molasses, and distant fire, the faint crackle of flames somewhere unseen, and the occasional caw of a raven, a harbinger of stories yet untold. The city, the fields, and the forests seemed entwined in a single breath, holding history, sorrow, and anticipation all at once. The soldiers' clothes hung heavily on their frames, worn jackets, frayed shirts, the iron chains glinting faintly in moonlight. Every movement pulled at the skin, every creak of metal a reminder of captivity. Yet their eyes burned with quiet defiance. Behind the cabin, the trees were dense, moss-draped branches swaying with the wind. The forest seemed almost alive, whispering secrets, telling tales of men who had disappeared without a trace. The ground littered with the remnants of forgotten journeys, A distant howl rose from the swamp, low, mournful, yet familiar, echoing across the cane fields. It was the sound of nature mourning, or perhaps of souls unsettled. The soldiers paused listening, knowing instinctively that some presences could not be seen. Fires in the horizon flickered, not ordinary flames, but strange, almost deliberate sparks, as if the night itself carried warnings. And the soldiers, though bound, felt an uncanny connection to those distant lights. Stories of rebellion, resistance, and memory passing silently through the air. The air was thick with anticipation. Birds had fallen silent. Insects had paused mid-flight. Only the wind moved, weaving through the cabin, the trees, and the soldiers. A messenger of tales both historical and legendary. Nearby, the remains of another cabin stood. Its roof collapsed, walls half burned, evidence of a story interrupted, a family lost, a tale erased from the official record. Yet folklore whispered. Children of the area claimed to hear laughter cries and the shuffle of unseen feet. The city beyond the plantations thrummed faintly. Drums from a distant celebration, or echoes of a regiment long gone marching in memory. Each step seemed to carry warnings, prayers, and unfinished business. The soldiers shivered not from cold, but from recognition. In the shadows, animals stirred, raccoons, owls, and the occasional fox, all silent observers, all witnesses to the dance of man, history, and legend. The soldiers' breaths fogged in the night, mingling with the smoke and the whispers of the past. The moonlight caught glimmers on the chains, reflecting images of the past soldiers before them, ancestors, and perhaps the lost souls who would never rest. Each reflection was a story, a warning, a testament. From the cabin, a soft noise, a creak, a sigh. Perhaps wind, perhaps memory. The soldiers' hands tightened slightly. The night demanded attention, demanded remembrance, demanded silence. Somewhere beyond the fields, music floated faintly, a spiritual carried by the wind. The notes danced across the night, stories embedded in melody, reminders that even in bondage voices survived, and that the echoes of valor could not be entirely erased. And in that moment, the soldiers were not just men in chains. They were conduits of history, walking, breathing, living proof of courage, of suffering, of stories that refused to die. Each sound, each shadow, each flicker of flame was a thread in a tapestry both factual and legendary, weaving a stage where the past could speak directly to the present. Historical records show that in early 1815, several regiments of African American soldiers were deployed across Louisiana. Yet official reports often omitted their contributions or mentioned them only in passing. Runaway slave advertisements and notices frequently included phrases like "fate unknown" or "never returned." Each line, typed or printed in black ink, carried a story of courage, but one that the world seemed eager to forget. In the quiet of New Orleans at night, these missing voices whispered through the streets and alleys, and folklore claimed that those who vanished did not entirely leave lingering as shadows among the living. In local WPA narratives, elders recounted tales of phantom marches, of soldiers seen walking in formation through the cane fields, their uniforms tattered, their faces pale under the moonlight. Children reported seeing shadows moving between the trees, stepping in perfect cadence, yet leaving no footprints in the soft earth. These stories were dismissed by outsiders as superstition, yet the communities who passed them down remembered with reverence, insisting that the soldiers' spirits had not yet found rest. On the outskirts of New Orleans, cabins still bore marks of struggle, scorch marks on walls, ruts in the earth, rusted tools left where work had ceased. Official documents might label these as abandoned or destroyed by fire, but locals spoke of strange phenomena, fires that reignited on their own lanterns, flickering without wind, and the faint sound of chains dragged across the floor. These reports blurred the line between fact and myth, between what had been recorded and what lingered in memory. Freedmen's Bureau records indicate that dozens of men disappeared after being pressed into service during the post-war occupation. Their names appeared on muster rolls one day and vanished the next. Families waited in vain at the docks and city gates. Letters to commanders went unanswered. And in the nights that followed, whispers spread through the black communities telling of men walking alone in the swamps, always appearing at the same moonlit hour. Some said these were warnings. Others claimed it was unfinished duty. The folklore layer grew thicker with each retelling. Stories told of soldiers whose eyes glowed faintly, even after death. Their chains rattled softly in the distance, announcing their passage. Some claimed to hear drums echoing far from any encampment, an unnatural cadence that no human could replicate. fact and legend intertwined. Where the archival pages ended, the oral traditions began carrying history through the breath of the living. Plantation records documented nightly watches and guard rotations, but many nights were unaccounted for gaps that historians struggled to fill. In these unrecorded hours, folklore filled the void. Ghostly figures patrolled the edges of the sugarcane fields. Some claimed they were soldiers returning to reclaim lost honor. Others said they were spirits warning the living of dangers long past. The air itself seemed heavy with anticipation, a living memory suspended between worlds. One runaway slave notice described a man named Ezekiel, last seen marching with a regiment into the marshes. Officially, his fate was unknown. Locals remembered differently. They spoke of seeing him at midnight walking alone along the levees, chains dragging silently behind him. Some swore he carried messages for others, guiding lost souls or warning of approaching threats. History had no record of these appearances, only memory preserved in whispered stories. Reports of phantom fires became more common during the sugar harvest. Night after night, distant glows appeared in the fields. Sometimes these were dismissed as swamp gas or lanterns misinterpreted, but eyewitnesses described patterns, flames rising in straight lines, moving as if directed. The soldiers' chains and lanterns seemed to appear within these fires, as if the night itself replayed their march. These phenomena became both a warning and a memorial, marking the places where courage had been tested and forgotten. Diaries from the era often mentioned inexplicable events, sudden chills in cabins, flickering shadows, the feeling of being watched. One account described a soldier's mother seeing her son return in a vision, standing tall in uniform, chains glinting. He spoke no words, only motioned for her to remember to pass the story to others. Fact with sparse evidence minimal, but folklore ensured these moments lived on. Newspapers from 1815 recorded incidents vaguely. Regiment reported missing men unaccounted for during night duty. Fires observed in plantations. They framed events as anomalies strange but explainable. Yet in communities themselves, the retelling added emotion, depth, and warning. Spirits of the lost were said to protect or guide, haunt or mourn, always tethered to the land and to memory. Accounts from soldiers' descendants described odd encounters decades later. A soldier glimpsed on a dock at dusk, footsteps heard on a deserted street, the smell of gunpowder lingering in the air. These stories were rarely published, often dismissed, but they persisted in oral traditions, binding fact to legend, memory to history, and the living to the dead. The rhythm of the night, according to folklore, mirrored the cadence of unseen troops. Drums carried faintly across fields. The rustle of leaves imitated marching steps. Those familiar with the terrain recognized the pattern. It was not coincidence. It was the heartbeat of the forgotten echoing across time. Letters and journals from commanding officers hinted at unrest, reports of soldiers disappearing from barracks, lack of discipline attributed to absentee tendencies. What the pages could not capture was fear that lingered in the shadows, and the certainty among locals that something otherworldly governed the missing men's fates. The plantation fields themselves seemed alive in the stories, canes swaying as if breathing, soil shifting without wind, whispers threaded through the crops. In these tales, the earth remembered every footstep, every act of courage, every injustice, and the soldiers' spirits were said to walk among the rows unseen but ever present. At night, the city seemed to blur. The river, the streets, the cabins all carried echoes, a train of memories trailing from one generation to the next. Facts suggested a quiet, somber city. Folklore insisted on a city alive with the movements of the unseen. Both were true depending on who was watching. Some elders described seeing figures in the fog, approaching silently only to vanish when confronted, chains rattling, faintly, lanterns dimly glowing. No one dared touch or follow them. It was respect, fear, or awe. But the stories persisted, as testimony of lives overlooked by history and immortalized by legend. Even the weather became part of the narrative. Sudden gusts of wind, unseasonable fog storms appearing without warning. In folklore, these were signs, omens tied to the soldiers' movements, a celestial record of bravery and tragedy. Historians had no explanations. The community preserved the meaning. By dawn, the first light revealed an eerily quiet city. Cabins, streets, and fields seemed unchanged. Yet those who remembered the night knew the soldiers had passed, not entirely corporeal, not entirely forgotten. The land itself retained the imprint of their courage, and the stories ensured they would not be lost. One night in the outskirts of New Orleans, a lone soldier vanished without a trace. Witnesses claimed to see chains dragging across the muddy ground, but no figure appeared. Lanterns swayed in the wind, yet there was no breeze. Some said it was Ezekiel again, walking between worlds. The official reports listed him as absent fate unknown. Locals whispered that he was guiding others invisible to the untrained eye, and still the earth held the imprint of his passage. A small town near the bayou became eerily silent after dark. Families left their windows open, hoping for a breeze, but the air carried only faint whispers. Strange flames appeared along the sugarcane fields, dancing erratically, illuminating the night with a spectral glow. Those who dared to follow the light reported hearing muffled footsteps and distant drum beats. Yet, when they turned corners, nothing remained. Fact records were silent, but folklore remembered. On another plantation, a regiment of African American soldiers was reported to have disappeared during routine night drills. Official logs suggested confusion, miscommunication, perhaps desertion. Yet in oral histories, the men were seen marching under the moon shadows, stretching unnaturally long across the field. Their chains glimmered faintly, reflecting a light that did not exist. And somewhere a drum echoed perfectly in rhythm with the steps of the unseen. Children in the city spoke of ghost parades, lines of soldiers appearing at midnight, moving silently along deserted streets. Parents dismissed it as imagination, but elders remembered the patterns. Years later, footprints were found in soft dirt, but no one had been there. The records did not acknowledge the event yet. The stories persisted, each whisper carrying the memory of bravery, loss, and mystery. One soldier, Thomas by name, reportedly disappeared while tending to a watchtower. The official record stated he fell ill and did not return, but locals claimed to see his silhouette in the treetops, arms raised as if calling to comrades long gone. His chains rattled in perfect harmony with distant drums, and sometimes faint singing could be heard, spirituals carried on the wind, linking past to present. Fires continued to appear without explanation. Some glowed orange, others blue. One night an entire field seemed ablaze, yet the morning revealed no burn marks. Folk wisdom said the flames were a memory, the spirits of the lost soldiers reenacting their march. The patterns were deliberate, a haunting choreography only those who remembered could understand. Fact denied it, folklore embraced it. In the city's barracks, entries in the logbook became erratic. Names appeared, then disappeared. Officers spoke in hushed tones of ghostly movements. Doors creaked open at night. Shadows shifted against walls. The soldiers were accounted for on paper, yet folklore insisted they roamed freely, conducting unfinished duties. A rhythm persisted, unseen, undeniable, a heartbeat of history. Reports of sudden disappearances were not limited to soldiers. Families claimed that household members vanished overnight. A servant might leave for the fields and never return. Lanterns would dim inexplicably. Footsteps would echo in empty rooms. The patterns mirrored those of the missing troops, linking civilian and military mystery. Fact could not explain, but folklore carried the warnings forward. The swamp itself became a character. Trees swayed in unnatural patterns, water reflecting ghostly figures. Travelers reported hearing commands shouted in the distance, only to find the area deserted. The landscape held memory. Footprints in mud-broken reeds disturbed water lilies. These became markers invisible to most but vivid in legend, a living memory carved into the earth. One night, a young boy claimed to see a regiment crossing a bridge, chains dragging lanterns floating beside them. His father scoffed, yet the boy insisted, drawing detailed sketches of uniforms, faces, and formations. Weeks later, traces of the footprints appeared on the very bridge, indistinct but undeniable. Fact records ignored it. Folklore preserved it, and the story spread from village to village. The rhythm of the marches was often reported as synchronous with distant drum beats, echoes traveling through the fields, across rivers, even into the city streets. No one knew the source. Some believed the drums came from the past. Others said the soldiers themselves beat invisible instruments, each beat a memory, a call to witness courage erased from official history. Fires appeared in haunted cabins as well, sudden, unexplained, moving along walls and floors. Eyewitnesses claimed the soldiers themselves guided the flames, walking alongside them, shaping them, like dancers in ritual. Smoke lingered long after the blaze vanished. The structures bore no damage, yet the memory, indelible, remained. On one plantation, a lone drummer boy disappeared. The papers listed him as missing, but villagers spoke of hearing his drum echo at midnight. It was faint at first, then louder, then fading, the cadence matching the Phantom Regiment's steps. Chains rattled in time with each drumbeat, invisible but audible. Fear and awe mingled. Shadows moved independently of light. A tree branch swayed while the wind lay still. Lanterns flickered without air. Some claimed that soldiers' faces appeared within the smoke of the fire, eyes glinting, chains shining faintly. Those who looked too long reported dreams that night, dreams of marching through fields and cities, carrying messages from the forgotten. Families recounted evenings when candles extinguished mysteriously, whispers of commands, advice, or warnings whispered through rooms. Often children would point at corners where nothing stood. Elders insisted that the soldiers pass through unseen, protecting warning, or perhaps replaying history. Fact denied it. Folklore demanded attention. One river crossing became infamous. A regiment supposedly marched across a shallow delta. Records said they completed training. Locals claimed the river ran red with spectral reflection. Lanterns hovered above water, casting shadows on unseen figures. And footsteps echoed across mudflats, lingering long after the soldiers were gone. Mail and letters went missing during this period. Documents vanished from post offices. Official reports were incomplete or contradictory. Yet in the oral tradition, these letters contained warnings, instructions, and messages from soldiers now beyond the physical world. Memory filled the gaps where records failed, preserving the story. At the edge of town, a family cabin remained untouched for decades, yet lanterns would appear lit inside. Faint voices carrying spirituals drifted through the night air. Anyone who entered would feel a presence, chains rattling softly, footsteps pacing. The story was never officially recorded, yet the folklore ensured it endured. Some nights the city itself seemed to breathe, streets and fields alive with whispers, shadows, and faint light. The missing men were everywhere and nowhere, the past wrapped around the present like mist, fact and folklore entwined. History remembered not in books, but in perception, sensation, and the uncanny. And as dawn approached, the sounds faded, the fires vanished, the shadows receded, yet the impression remained, a city waking from a night haunted by its own history. The soldier's presence, though unseen, left an indelible mark, a rhythm, a cadence, a story that would echo across generations, and the stage was set for what history had not yet revealed. Official military dispatches recorded troop movements that were strangely inconsistent. Men listed as present one day, absent the next. Orders unfulfilled, messages unanswered. Yet oral tradition insisted they had been seen marching under the moonlight. Their shadows stretched long across fields, their chains clinking in perfect rhythm. Some claimed these were warnings, others claimed blessings. Either way, the memory persisted. Reports from Reconstruction-era documents described abandoned settlements, streets littered with personal effects, doors swinging on broken hinges. Historians labeled it neglect or economic collapse. Folklore told a different story. Families had fled after witnessing ghostly figures, the spirits of soldiers walking silently, guiding or haunting. Each night the town whispered secrets that no archive would record. Maps of exodus or migrations show sudden gaps, routes that vanish into swamps and forests. Officially, these were unrecorded detours. In local tales, these paths were haunted, soldiers moving invisibly among the trees, leaving faint footprints in mud, lanterns appearing briefly, illuminating chains glinting, a landscape alive with memory blending fact and legend seamlessly. Letters from commanding officers detail unusual occurrences, missing personnel reports of distant drumbeats, unexplained fires. The language is careful, detached, often hesitant. Oral histories fill in the gaps. People spoke of soldiers appearing in vision and dream, sometimes guiding those lost, sometimes warning the living, always present, never recorded. On plantations, ritualistic ceremonies were whispered about, songs sung at night, rhythms, mimicking distant drums. Some claimed these were calls to the soldiers' spirits. Others insisted the music summoned protection. Fact records mention gatherings, but rarely purpose. Folklore insists on spiritual significance, linking communities to the soldiers' unseen march. Newspaper accounts from the 1820s mention phantom sightings along levees and riverbanks. Witnesses describe figures marching in uniform chains, rattling lanterns floating. Editors dismissed these as superstition, but letters to local officials expressed genuine fear. The line between what was reported and what was experienced became tenuous. Stories carried the weight of collective memory. Dream narratives were recorded in WPA interviews decades later. People describe visions of soldiers walking through their homes. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes silent. Their chains glimmered faintly in the moonlight, warnings or guidance no one knew. These dreams were seen as messages from the past connecting the living to events long gone. Battlefields bore their own testimony. Skirmishes reported soldiers counted, then uncounted. Some were never listed again. Folklore told of phantom regiments appearing at night, retracing lost marches. Footsteps audible on empty soil, drums beating softly, smoke rising though no fire burned. The land itself remembered. Exodus or migration routes were said to cross haunted zones. Travelers reported seeing figures in uniform, sometimes marching, sometimes standing still, chains glinting in morning fog, lanterns flickering unnaturally. Facts suggested delays or detours. Folklore preserved intent and meaning. Every spectral sighting reinforced memory of those lost. Families recounted objects moving on their own, chairs rocking, lanterns dimming. Sometimes shadows of soldiers appeared briefly in the corner of rooms, chains rattling, steps pacing. Officials never documented such phenomena, yet the oral record ensured that the memory of courage persisted. Religious ceremonies incorporated remembrance. Prayers at midnight, songs, drum beats, intended to honor the dead. Some said spirits were present, guiding, observing. The living felt the connection, a tangible thread linking generations. Official documents noted gatherings. Folklore imbued them with spectral significance. Fires reappeared in abandoned cabins, no cause identified. Eyewitnesses swore the soldiers were present, guiding the flames, walking among them. Smoke lingering after the flames vanished. Facts remained silent. Legends preserved the presence, the purpose, the memory. Spirituals echoed through towns and fields. Songs that spoke of loss, courage, and endurance, sung quietly at night. The melodies carried messages, a hidden history embedded in music. Soldiers unseen, yet their influence tangible through rhythm and verse. Fact recorded melody, folklore recorded meaning. Riverbanks became sites of memory and myth. Boats vanished, figures seen crossing. Chains glinting in the moonlight reflected in water. Some were thought to be alive, others ghostly, each citing a link between reality and legend. Historians ignored the details. Oral tradition never forgot. Footprints appeared and disappeared in fields and dirt roads. Chains dragged faintly through the mud. Official logs did not account for it. Yet locals remembered the impressions, proof not in records but in perception. The soldiers' presence remained both corporeal and spectral. Thunderstorms often accompanied sightings, wind carrying distant drumbeats, rain falling silently on fields where phantom regiments were said to have marched. Folklore interpreted this as divine acknowledgement. Fact merely noted weather, history intertwined with myth. One plantation master wrote of a watchful presence. No men accounted for, yet work continued. Crops tended, livestock fed, shadows moving among the cane. The unseen guided the living, a persistent echo of duty, courage, and vigilance. At dusk, lanterns glowed inexplicably along levees. Figures appeared briefly, chains catching the light, then vanished. Witnesses left with stories. Historians left with records. Folklore left with memory, all intertwined, impossible to separate. Across New Orleans, tales converged. Soldiers moving, unseen lights, flickering drums echoing. The living carried fear, respect, reverence. Fact and folklore interlocked, both necessary to preserve what history tried to erase. By the first light of morning, silence returned. The rivers calm, the fields empty, yet the memory of the night remained. Chains rattling in dreams, footsteps echoing in minds, flames dancing in imagination. Fact incomplete, folklore complete, and the story pressed onward. Lost documents hinted at agreements and treaties during Reconstruction. Pages that disappeared from archives, names erased, lines crossed. Yet local elders remembered the details. Whispered stories carried across generations. Soldiers bound in chains, yet unbowed, walked unseen among the records. Their presence lingered, demanding acknowledgement. Witnesses reported glimpses of men in uniform marching silently through plantations, eyes hollow, chains glinting faintly. The wind carried faint drum beats. Officials recorded nothing, but folklore preserved each step, each cadence, an echo of courage that refused to be forgotten. A child in the 1820s claimed to see soldiers standing along the riverbank, Lanterns floating above their heads, chains dragging in the mud, shadows stretched unnaturally long. When grown, he described the vision in detail, names, formations, the rhythm of unseen steps. History could not verify, but memory held firm. The archives contained gaps, missing roles, blank pages where names should have been. Historians puzzled. Some concluded clerical error. The community knew better. Soldiers moved in ways the records could not capture. Their duty extended beyond ink and paper, into the realm of legend. Fires flared in distant fields, inexplicable yet following precise paths. Observers claimed to see shadows within the flames, soldiers guiding them, walking among them, smoke curling in patterns that told stories of loyalty, resistance, and sacrifice. Fact ignored it. Folklore preserved it. A farmhouse long abandoned glowed faintly at midnight. Figures appeared in windows, moving silently, chains rattling in perfect rhythm. The walls seemed to breathe, and the floors whispered under invisible footsteps. Those who entered felt the weight of history pressing upon them. Rivers reflected lights that had no source, lanterns hovering above water, shadows gliding along levees, soldiers' figures appearing and vanishing, dreamlike, unreal. Yet memories carried these sightings, stories told around fires in hushed tones across decades. Some evenings, spirituals echoed across fields, songs sung softly by no visible person, the melody intertwined with distant drum beats. Oral history insisted that the missing soldiers sang through the night, carrying messages of endurance, warning, and courage. Fact could not capture the sound, only folklore preserved it. Eyewitnesses described a regiment moving under a new moon, chains glinting, lanterns dim, steps perfectly synchronized, no footprints left behind. Trees seemed to bend toward the march. The air itself felt heavy with presence. Fear and awe mingled in equal measure. A local priest documented strange phenomena in his diary. Shadows moving against walls, doors opening on their own, whispers in languages he did not understand. Chains clinking, a faint drum echoing. He noted it solemnly, not daring to interpret, yet his words carried the weight of unseen witnesses. A river crossing became infamous. Boats were found, empty, supplies missing, yet no one claimed responsibility. Later, locals described spectral figures guiding the vessels, chains trailing and water lanterns bobbing above. Fact denied it. Folklore preserved the event. Night skies above plantations flickered with unusual lights. Some claimed to see formations, soldiers moving with precision, fires illuminating faces grim and solemn. The rhythm of chains matched drum beats. Each observer left with a memory, the land itself holding witness. Personal letters vanished, messages to commanders never delivered. Some claimed the soldiers themselves took them, carrying warnings or secret instructions. Only whispered stories remained, the air thick with secrets both historical and spectral. Shadows lengthened unnaturally as soldiers marched, lanterns casting eerie shapes on fields and cabins, chains clinking in time, a child's vision of men appearing on rooftops, vanishing before being seen clearly. The city, the fields, and the forests all participated, holding memory, watching, waiting. In one swamp, footprints appeared in mud, then disappeared without trace. Observers reported faint drum beats, soft chanting, mist hovering over water, shadows stretching across cane fields. The land itself seemed alive, remembering, echoing, preserving. Fires flared inside abandoned cabins. No cause could be identified. Shadows walked alongside the flames. Figures vanished as quickly as they appeared. Smoke lingered long after, leaving behind a memory of presence, of duty, and of endurance. Soldiers' spirits were said to carry lanterns along riverbanks, chains glinting faintly, guiding lost travelers, warning trespassers, reminding descendants that courage and sacrifice were not confined to paper. History could not capture them. Only memory and story could. In one village, elders recounted a night when every household lantern flickered simultaneously. Shadows of soldiers appeared in each window, then vanished at once. Silence fell, and yet the memory endured. Stories passed down, warning, inspiring, haunting. Fact remained absent, but folklore immortalized. Across New Orleans, riverbanks, and fields, the pattern repeated. Chains, lanterns, footsteps, drums, spirituals. Soldiers present and absent. Memory and history intertwined. The city held its breath. Witnesses left stunned. Legends etched in every corner. As dawn broke, the night's march faded. Fires extinguished, shadows disappeared. Yet the rhythm persisted, chains rattling in dreams, footsteps echoing in hearts. A bridge between fact and folklore, between history and myth. The stage was set for the stories yet to come. Dawn broke over New Orleans, the city slowly stirring, streets damp with morning dew, yet silence lingered. The echoes of the night's phantom marches still hung in the air. Chains rattled faintly in dreams. Lanterns flickered in memory. History and legend intertwined seamlessly. Plantation fields stood empty, trampled cane and scorched earth, telling stories that no document could hold. Fires long extinguished left shadows on the soil. Locals whispered of soldiers' spirits still walking the rows. Invisible hands tending crops, guiding the living, protecting what remained. Families recounted tales passed down through generations. Names spoken softly around fires, children shivering at the thought. Yet each retelling preserved courage, endurance, and loss. The soldiers' stories remained alive even where paper failed. Spirituals continued to echo across the city and fields, sung quietly, carried on the wind, voices reaching unseen ears, songs telling of loyalty, sacrifice, and the unbroken chain of memory. Fact might be silent, folklore preserved the melody, preserving meaning. Abandoned cabins and levees bore their marks. Moss grew over footprints, doors swung silently in the night, chains dragged faintly across the floor. Some villagers swore they could see silhouettes against the morning light, shadows of history, lingering, enduring. Scholars visited the city decades later, searching archives for missing names, lost regiments, vanished letters. They found gaps, records incomplete, yet oral traditions filled the void. Legends, whispers, dream accounts, each story a thread connecting past to present. The Phantom Regiment became part of local consciousness. Not just soldiers, but guardians. Warnings for the living, reminders of the cost of courage. Some nights, townsfolk claimed to hear the distant cadence of unseen feet, a rhythm echoing across time. Fires appeared occasionally, flickering along old plantation roads. No cause, no explanation. Yet the community understood. They were memories, echoes, signs, of valor never fully recognized, a spectral history carved into the landscape. Dreams carried messages. Soldiers appeared silently, guiding descendants, warning intruders, inspiring hope. The living felt their presence, footsteps soft but certain, chains glinting, lanterns glowing, a bridge between the world of the living and the dead. On riverbanks, reflections of lanterns shimmered, figures appearing only in morning mist. Chains dragged through shallow water. Drums sounded faintly from nowhere, a reminder that history is never truly gone. Its echoes persist in air, water, and earth. Children grew up with these stories, passing them along to their children. Stories of chains, marches, phantom flames, and unseen drums. Fact incomplete, folklore complete. Courage immortalized in memory. The city itself became a storyteller. Streets once busy with markets were quiet at dusk. Yet whispers of soldiers moving unseen persisted. Lanterns swayed in empty windows. Chains rattled faintly in dreams. Each observer carrying fragments of history, reality, and legend inseparable. Even scholars admitted the impossibility. Records missing, documents destroyed. Official history silent, but the stories endured, carried by communities passed orally, faithful to memory, emotion, and reverence. The echoes of the soldiers refusing to fade. Rivers, swamps, and levees held traces, water reflecting phantom lanterns, footsteps appearing and disappearing, fires igniting without reason, shadows moving, the land remembering, and the people listening, stories preserved in instinct and imagination. The soldiers' spirits became guardians, not threatening but protective, watching over towns, families, and fields. Their presence subtle, felt more than seen, chains clinking softly as a heartbeat, a history alive, entwined with the living. Festivals, spirituals, and prayers incorporated remembrance. Songs sung at dusk, stories told at night, children carrying tales forward, ghosts walking alongside memory. Fact may have been incomplete, but folklore carried truth, enduring, eternal. Lanterns continued to appear, flickering at the edge of vision, shadows stretching across fields, chains glinting faintly in sunlight. Locals acknowledged them quietly. A collective understanding, courage recognized in whispers and memory. By dusk, the city and fields quieted again. Yet a tension remained. Footsteps in dreams, chains in memory, flames dancing in imagination. Every corner of New Orleans held a story, a whisper, an echo, facts silent, folklore alive. The soldiers' bravery, once unrecorded, now persisted in spirit. History had attempted to erase them, but memory, song, and legend refused. Each night the stories replayed, each dawn renewed, reminding the living of sacrifice unseen. And as the final light faded, the city seemed to breathe with the past. Every shadow, every ripple in the river, every whisper in the wind, carried echoes of those bound soldiers, their story unfinished, awaiting the ears and hearts of those willing to remember. You have now heard one chapter. The echoes continue. Stay with us. Follow these voices, for history is never truly silent.